What's up, heathens? How y'all doing? Tonight, we're gonna be looking at a video where a guy presents 5 fundamental problems with atheism. And of course, he's totally misunderstanding what atheism even is, but he's got 5 things that bug him about atheists, I guess. And so we're gonna go through those tonight. If you're interested in what's bugging the fuck out of this guy, then please stay tuned. Anyways, let's get on into this this fucking jungle of a video. For one thing, the reason why he has all these plants in his video, if you're wondering, is because he's got like a botanical eBay store where apparently he sells botanical shit. And I'm guessing, judging by the sword that you can see in the corner there next to my thumb, I'm guessing he's an amateur ninja as well. Or maybe not a ninja, but maybe a Viking warrior. I don't know what kind of sword that is in the back there, but he might think he's part of the Final Fantasy.
I think he uses the sword to get through the plants.
Oh yeah, does he chop down the plants? Yeah, this guy's got a botanical eBay thing. That's why he's surrounded by plants. It would be a lot like me being surrounded by the little Crestus question like cross things, as well as like the Skeptic Mafia dude, and just me peeking through being like, hey guys, today we're gonna talk about some bullshit. Y'all ready to talk about some bullshit? Have you noticed all of my swag and, well, the swag and the app store and all of this shit? Hey, Corona! I'm still on Corona.
Now, the first issue that I have with atheism is that it seeks to prove other religions wrong rather than prove itself right.
Okay, so right off the bat here, atheism is simply just a lack of belief in God, which is the most common definition of it. There are atheists out there that make the positive claim that no gods exist. And I agree that you bear the burden of proof if you say no gods exist whatsoever. But for the most part, when atheists tell you that they're an atheist, what they mean is that they just lack a belief in any kind of deity. They also lack a belief in the supernatural or like the spiritual realms or anything like that. But he's starting off right off the bat wrong by thinking that atheism has to prove itself right. Because like if I lack a belief in the Loch Ness Monster, I don't have to 100% prove that the Loch Ness Monster doesn't exist. I just am not convinced that the Loch Ness Monster does exist. It's a burden of proof is on the person that is claiming that the Loch Ness Monster does exist. Or, you know, substitute for any kind of big dick creature in the sky that you want to.
The goal of atheism doesn't seem to be so much to prove that there is no God or prove that there is no creator or universal consciousness or life after death, right? That when we die, it's eternal blackness and wants to prove karma wrong and all that sort of thing. That's not so much their goal, but rather to prove that people who believe that are wrong because their beliefs are not founded in scientific basis.
Well, I would say that you're wrong here again is because it's not that they're wrong scientifically, it's just that their argumentation is bad and their arguments do not support their conclusions. So it really has nothing to do with science, even though science is tangentially involved, because most of the time we use science to verify whether or not this evidence actually supports the conclusion, right? A lot of times science is used for that. Sometimes philosophy is used for it. Just general logic can be used for that as well. So it's not really the science that is the issue here. The issue is that the arguments are bad and do not support the conclusion. And so it's not that it's incumbent upon atheists to prove that the religious claims are false. It's just that when they ask us, well, why don't you believe in God? Well, here's a reason to believe in God. And then we respond with, no, that's a dumb fuck reason because your argument doesn't support the conclusion that you come to. It's not that it's incumbent upon any atheist to prove anything wrong, or that's the goal of atheism or atheists. It's just something that naturally happens in a conversation.
Atheism builds a lot of its claims about the world on science, right? And I have 2 big issues with this.
Okay, well, also, atheism doesn't build any conclusions whatsoever. Atheists more than likely do use science and other ways to inform them of reality, but it's very important to remember what the goal of science and the scientific method is, and that's to describe the reality that we live in. You know, using our experiences and using other people's experiences, we try to find the things that are regardless of the subjective nature of our experiences, something that we can ground outside of ourselves and say that, well, this is reality. That is the goal of science. It's to paint a picture of reality that is as accurate as we can make it. That's the reason why a lot of people, even Christians, use science to inform themselves about reality. Because you don't see Christians or any other religious person going around right now thinking that God is the thing that controls the rain. I mean, you got some people out there that are dipshitty enough to say that God caused this hurricane to destroy the homosexuals and wherever the fuck. But that's kind of a small group of Christians out there that kind of believe that, which I have to say, the divide in Christianity right now, you could definitely tell the ones that are a bit more reasonable, and then there are just the craziest fucking ones. In short, atheists and people in general do use science to inform themselves about reality and to shape their idea of what is reality. Again, that's not part of atheism. Atheism is just not being convinced by your bad arguments.
First, it is not a very compelling argument, right? It's a very bold claim to make, to tell someone to turn away from their eternal salvation, or really their moral guidance system, right? Because that's what a lot of people use religion for.
Nobody is telling anybody to, one, leave their religion, two, leave their moral foundation, or however you put it. Nobody is asking people to do this. I mean, at most, atheists, like as general people, when they have discussions, they try to convince the other person that their arguments are bad. But in the end, it's not like we're sitting here demanding people like leave their religion. I think that there are plenty of people in this world that have religion and are personal about it, and they don't go around telling us that homosexuals are being punished by God with hurricanes, and they're perfectly fine about it. And I don't have a problem with those people. I don't have a problem with people that have religion, are in religion, or are part of a religion. I mean, I don't like religion. That's why I'm an anti-theist, but that doesn't mean that I want to force people out of a religion. So far, you've just been completely wrong, just all over the place.
On the very basis that their ideas aren't founded in scientific data, basically, in scientific studies, right?
I mean, we kind of covered that one a little bit ago. It's not really science. It's just that your arguments are bad.
And my second issue with this particular approach towards your philosophy of the human experience and the world, and that there is no God, and there's no creator, and then death is the end, and universal consciousness and all of that, is that it really ignores the subjectivity of the human experience, right? We are all experiencing the world differently based on the way that we've been raised, based on the way that we have, based on the experiences we've had, whether they be spiritual in nature, whether they be divine in nature, near-death experiences, all that sort of thing. It really ignores that and just says we need to only rely on science for our understanding of the world.
I'm not saying that you only have to rely on science, but currently right now, science is the best way to paint this picture of reality. It's regardless of everyone's individual experience. It seems like you have a problem with science, not a problem with atheism. You're just sort of ad hoc tacking on science to atheism because you think that they're somehow connected. There are plenty of scientifically minded people that are theists. There are theistic evolutionists out there. It really doesn't make sense for you to tack on science to atheism and then express your discontent with science. Also, one of the main features of science is that regardless of anybody's experience, it will give you a consistent answer. right? That is what we're looking at, because reality, like the absolute reality, the truth that you hear all the religious people talking about, like everything that happens in reality, it happens regardless of our individual experiences. You would want to remove that particular bias, when you're trying to discern what is reality. So I really don't understand what your problem is. It kind of seems like you just like people being able to make up whatever kind of fucking reality they want to. That's not how reality works.
And I guess I have a point 3 about that as well. It places all meaning in science as well. It basically says, atheism basically says that your belief system is meaningless because it is not supported by scientific evidence. And the fact of the matter, guys, is that the only person who can give meaning to anything in your life is you, right? You are the only person who can give value to things. If you think that science is the only way that you can give meaning to something, it is very likely that you will live a very depressing life, because it comes down to you, guys. It really does come down to you, what you enjoy, what you're going to give meaning to, and how you're going to live your life. And at the end of it, be okay with what you've done. Be happy with what you've done.
Let me start off by agreeing that we are the ones that assign meaning to things. I assign meaning to my life. He assigns meaning to his life and probably his plants there. The next thing, atheism does not say any of this, okay? Just to start back from the beginning of this section, atheism is simply a lack of belief in a God. It is not asserting that religion has no meaning because it doesn't, or it's not based on science. That's not what atheism does. 2, science does not assign meaning to things. Like we discussed before, science is about describing the reality as it exists, regardless of whether we are here or not. So with that being the goal of science, science is literally not in the business of assigning meaning to things. Now, he's saying that atheists use science to assign meaning to things. I disagree with that. We're not assigning meaning to things. We're just using science in order to prove that your arguments are bad. But that's not the only thing that we use. We also use logic and philosophy and all these other things in order to demonstrate how wrong you are about things. Now, there are some things in some religions that can be disproven by science. And if your religion does not comport with reality or what we experience in reality, then I do have to ask, what good is it? If your religion is not going to give you an accurate picture of the world that you live in, why have it? That's my point. It's not me. He would take it as me saying, oh, well, you should give up religion. Religion has no meaning. But that's not at all what I said. What I said was I don't see the point in that religion because it doesn't match reality. So what good is it? That's my opinion on it, right? That's how I see it. It's up to you to make a decision as to how you assign meaning to your religion after that. If it doesn't faze you, that's fine. But if it does faze you and it does cause you to relook at things, that's up to you. I'm not the one doing anything in this situation. You are the one that's assigning meaning to things, that's reevaluating your religion, that's making up your mind as to whether or not your religion is meaningful.
And give meaning to what you've done. That is the true purpose. So, okay, now my second problem with atheism is that it ignores the fact that science is composed of theories, right? Science is composed entirely of theories. It is basically a system that humans have created to develop their understanding of the world. But it is a flawed system. It is not perfect.
Wait a second. Why does it have to be perfect? He's trying to put science on the same playing field as religion. Because what religion does is it says that it has the absolute truth about reality. When no religion that I can think of actually succeeds in that, obviously. But he's trying to put it on the same playing field as science by saying that science has to be 100% accurate. That it has to be more than just beyond reasonable doubt, but 100% every single time in order for it to be useful or for it to be reliable. In fact, in the scientific method, it admits internally that it can be flawed. And that's why the scientific method is set up to where you can reevaluate things given new information and you can come to a better conclusion about reality. Why is it that he has to have the 100% absolute truth about things? Why is that the criteria for something to be reliable? I feel like he's playing some double standards here because he's not applying the same criteria to his own religion. Because while he says that science can't give us a reliable 100% answer every single time, like it can be wrong, therefore it's not useful or not reliable. Well, he needs to apply that to his own religion because there's so many things in Christianity, Islam. I'm not exactly sure which denomination he's part of yet. I know he says it later, but any of the religions, if you apply that same kind of concept to, they also wouldn't be reliable. If you're going to boil everything down to just being unreliable, then what use is it to even make that assertion in the first place? What benefit does this criteria even give us? I really don't see a benefit.
And the fact of the matter is that no scientific theory can be proven fully true, right? And that's a huge blind spot of atheism. They really want to rely on science, but the fact of the matter is that even if we are going to build our entire understanding of the world on this, and we're going to build everything off of it, science is changing. It is not a static thing. Our understanding of the world is changing as time goes on, right? But again, at the end of the day, we cannot prove anything fully true with science, right?
And I still don't see a problem with that. In fact, I would hope that we are wrong about most things in reality. If we knew everything with 100% accuracy and reliability, then what do we have left to do? I mean, other than just, I guess, live our lives and everything. The fact that I don't know everything in this universe or in this reality is very intriguing to me, and I just want to know more. That's why I learn things through that Today I Learned stuff, and just in general, I recently learned how to program in not a new language, but a new framework for my Crestus app. I mean, I'm constantly learning new things because I don't know everything. That's the beauty of the human experience, is to explore and find out new things. So I don't understand why you think that science having to be 100% accurate to be reliable is really a useful criteria for all this. So I don't know. Maybe he'll go more into depth in that later. I don't remember. Yes, science has a lot of scientific theories in it, but it also has laws and other things like that. Scientific theories are backed up by evidence, repeatable and testable conclusions. So scientific theories are the closest thing to 100% sure that we can be. Now, they're not 100% sure. They inherently have to have a little bit of doubt built in, because if new information comes along that proves that scientific theory incorrect, then it has to have the ability to change. And he sees that as a bad thing, and I still don't understand why he thinks it's a bad thing.
So it's kind of bold in that way, atheism. It's kind of bold in the way that it says, well, because we have science, we don't need to bother with any of this other stuff, any of the spiritual nonsense or these people gathering in religious areas. We just need to use science because it is our understanding of the world. And it is a very, very bold claim to make. And it is kind of a faith-based system in and of itself, but I'll get onto that later.
No, science is not faith-based. That's why science has evidence, because you don't need faith and it doesn't require faith. Faith is completely taken out of the equation with the scientific method. If the scientific method ever starts requiring you to just believe shit without evidence, it would just not be the scientific method anymore, because you have to have evidence in order to support your conclusions in science. Of course, this is supposed to be a video on atheism, and all he's done for two of his points is rant about how much he hates science. I feel like this guy got a D in chemistry class, like in high school or something, and he's just never forgiven it.
My point number 3 is that there's a religious negativity bias, right? If you talk to someone who is an atheist and ask them why they don't like religion, oftentimes they will bring up things like the Crusades. I've seen people bring up things like Islamic terrorism, like, for example, the Catholic Church's suppression of information, right? And yes, I mean, they've got a good point, right? There have been really terrible religious people, just as there have been really, really terrible atheist people. I mean, just look at the Soviet Union, right? I mean, persecution of all kinds of religion in the Soviet Union, right? So neither sect of beliefs is entirely blameless, right? It's humans, right? Humans are crazy, and there's good people and there's bad people. It doesn't really matter, if they believe one thing or not. The fact of the matter is that people are going to be good and people are going to be evil.
I agree with this point. Well, not the entire point, not his actual point, but with that very last thing that he said, being that it's people. People can be crazy and bad. State atheism is not the atheism that exists now. State atheism is a completely separate and different thing, and that was an assault on religious communities. Atheism, the atheist community that we have now worldwide, is not the same thing as state atheism. I just want to make sure that I drill that home. Now, number two, I don't think that all religious people are crazy or are horrible and abusive. Like he said at the end, I think that bad people are going to be bad and good people are going to be good. But as I think his last name's Weinberg, he said that good people will do good things and bad people will do bad things. But for a good person to do something bad, that takes religion, or not necessarily just religion, but any kind of cultish or indoctrination style of belief where you just have to listen and believe to what somebody else says. Now, that being said, I can criticize the religion as it's written in their holy books. And when I say that Christianity is a horrible, abusive, genocidal, and bloody type of faith, I am not talking about the individuals that are in the faith. I am talking about the faith itself. We've been going through the Bible on our Daily Bible podcast that posts every Tuesday at 9:30 a.m. We've been going through it, and that's all that we've seen is God getting jealous over his chosen people, worshiping other gods, and then causing havoc on his own people, but also ordering his people to enslave and murder others for worshiping their own gods. And that's not even getting into the New Testament, which just reinforces what the Old Testament says. I mean, you got a little bit better things in the New Testament, but I mean, we're going to get there eventually.
Okay. Now, point number 4 is the complexity theory. And they like to poke holes in that as well. And basically the complexity theory is that, well, the world is far too complex, far too intricate and detailed, right? I mean, if you look at all the fields of study, look at all the different branches of things you can go into in college and all just the different crazy understandings in the world, and the fact that we still don't even understand things totally, and it's in their complete way, then there must be a creator, right? Because how could something this incredible emerge from absolutely nothing, right?
All right, so before he continues with this point, it's not that we say, like atheists, which again, he's talking about atheists, but he's complaining about science. We don't say that it came out of nothing. I don't know if he's actually looked into what the science says about the inflation of the universe. The best explanation that we have currently is that it was a fluctuation in a quantum scalar field that caused the sudden inflation of the universe. The inflaton particles that resulted from this huge release of energy was then transformed into regular matter that we find. Not that they were full atoms, but like they were spread out in protons and neutrons and all of the subatomic material. And eventually the universe became cool enough to where atoms could form and light could form. You have to understand that we don't think that it came out of nothing. There was something there. We all agree that something caused the universe to suddenly inflate. The difference here between a religious person and the atheist community is that we're not convinced that a God had to be the one to do it, right? We don't see the evidence necessary to suggest that God was necessary for that to happen. Now, he's just now complaining about the complexity argument, which is the teleological argument. It's formally known as that. And just because something seems complex does not mean that it couldn't have come about naturally through natural processes. You still need to show that a suspension of reality is needed in order for those things to be created. You can't actually show that, which is kind of funny when you consider just a little bit ago he was complaining about science not giving us 100% reliability on its answers, when this guy, or highly religious people in general that make these kinds of arguments, they can't 100% prove that God did it. And that's really the only answer that religion in general has, is to say that, well, God did it. Really, he's just got a problem with science and the scientific community. He doesn't have a problem with atheists. He does have a problem with atheists, but all of these problems he actually has with science.
And the atheist response to that is that because the world is complex, then there must be a thing that is more complex that created it. And if God is so complex that He created the world, then something must have created God. And it's this infinite loop, basically, what they get into. There's actually a Harvard scientist who I think brought that particular point up, and that basically they want to rest their understanding in what we know now, and ignore the fact that everything is so incredibly complex and crazy. And don't even get me started on the psychedelic aspect of that. It's still a huge branch of science that is yet to be unknown. You've only dipped a toe into that area so far.
So at this point, I think that this guy loves to trip on LSD. Apparently, the psychedelic part of reality is apparently something that we need to scientifically investigate. I'm not exactly sure about that. I think he's been watching too much of that show Fringe. Hey, honey, we should watch Fringe. Fringe is a good show. He just took it a little too literally. The point in bringing up the infinite regress that he was talking about is that's kind of a really simple argument against, well, God created this world, because then it kind of puts the religious people in the position of having to make a special pleading argument. They have to specially plead that their God is uncreated, that he was never created, therefore he's outside of this reality, and everything in this reality has a beginning or a cause or something created it. And so that ultimate creator has to be God because he was never created, right? For one thing, you can't prove that things need a creator in order to be like a sentient, conscious being to create or start the universe. You can't actually prove that with evidence. And that is where atheists have a problem. Now, that's not to say that this is a scientific answer against, or not answer, but rebuttal against him. This is just purely logic according to the evidence that he's presented. Because if he doesn't have the evidence to suggest that a God created everything, and the only explanation that he has is, well, shit's complex, therefore God had to create everything. Can you build a fucking leaf? I can't build a leaf. God created leaves. It's just a nonsensical argument. The teleological argument is, because we know how like things evolved over time. We know that it's a natural process. All of our previous experiences point to the fact that natural processes are the cause of everything that happens and exists in this reality.
But the issue that I have with that argument is that you don't really need to have something that created God. He kind of solves that if you really think about it, or the universal consciousness, or whatever you want to call it, right? The higher world, the higher dimensions, the spirit world, whatever you want to call it, like that kind of solves that riddle there, because it is a complex system that we cannot understand, right? And so this system around us is complex enough, so we're trying to make sense of this, but yes, there's something greater that we cannot understand. We cannot see how, we cannot fathom how that has created this world. I don't subscribe to there needs to be a hierarchy of things. I think there can be one great power, if you will.
You literally just rattled off a personal incredulity. That doesn't solve anything. You're just ad hoc asserting that this supernatural overworld hyper reality exists, and you're saying that solves shit. And then you're saying, well, I don't understand how this made up thing that I just made up or that other people made up for me, I don't know how that works, so therefore it solves it internally. So I'm asking you now, how does that solve it? How does that mean that God is uncreated? I get that you don't know, and that's fine, but you have to be able to explain how that actually solves the problem. And it really doesn't. Because one, you can't prove that this hyper overworld reality spiritual realm exists. Two, you can't even go from there to proving that God is uncreated. And then three, I don't even know what in the fuck you're talking about when you talk about the spiritual supernatural overworld land. Like, I have no idea what that could possibly be. It seems like you don't know what the fuck it is either, but you seem to just make it up on the spot. And it's really sad how you make shit up and then you're like, well, I don't know how that works. It just does.
Now, my point number 5 is, again, that it ignores the subjectivity of experience, right? And this kind of goes back to what I was saying about meaning as well. But humans' experiences really are subjective, right? This is actually very apparent if you look at situations where people are in a very violent circumstance, okay? Or a really horrifying circumstance, if they're in some kind of a shooting or some kind of a...
Before he gets into whatever kind of fucked up scenario that he's trying to get into here, if everybody has a subjective experience, we don't have God physically writing things in this universe. God didn't write the Bible. God didn't write the Quran. People wrote the Quran, like a person did. So if everybody has their own subjective experience in this world, then wouldn't all of the religious writings that he's probably read, wouldn't those be written by these people who have had subjective experiences? So how could a subjective experience get you to absolute reality? I would love for somebody to explain to me why that means that what's in those books, in any religious books that he takes as 100% truth, why does he take those things as 100% true when it's obvious that it's just a subjective person's opinion?
A situation where their life is on the line. People see things differently in that circumstance, right? People will say that different amounts of shots were fired, or, something else happened, right? If you talk to the people at the Twin Towers, they all have different descriptions of what happened. And it's really universal across the board, right? When people are in that particular panicked state of mind, they perceive the world differently. And that kind of goes back to Einstein's theory of relativity, right? And that our understanding of space and time is relative to where we are in space and time, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, that's true. It is, but it's not that reality morphs to our experiences. Our experiences might distort reality, but I mean, that's not even what special relativity or general relativity is even about. I mean, it's about the experience of time based on where you are, like, and how fast you're going. Like, that's what that's talking about. I feel like this is a bit of an equivocation game here, because he's equivocating what special and general relativity talk about as far as perception of time and space, and he's trying to use it to suggest that our individual experiences are somehow governed by the laws of general relativity, in that what we perceive as being true, I guess, is subjective to where we are, how fast we're moving, and everything like that. Like, I mean, things happen in reality regardless of whether or not we experience it. I mean, I'm sure that two meteors just clashed together somewhere in the universe, and regardless of where I am or how fast I'm going, that still happened. Just like with the Twin Towers example that he had. Sure, people remember it differently. People had different experiences depending on where they are. That doesn't change the facts of what happened on that day. They still happened, regardless of how anybody experienced them. And because we're living in an age of video cameras and 24-hour news cycles, we have full coverage of everything that happened that day. Not absolutely everything, but as far as what he's talking about here in his example.
And this kind of goes even further back to videos I've posted years and years ago about the dimensionality of the world, and how as three-dimensional creatures we are perceiving the world, right? We cannot fully perceive or fully see in three dimensions, but our understanding of the world is based on where we are in it, right? And that kind of also goes to the next level of it as well. Perhaps a fourth-dimensional creature would have a far better understanding of things. It could understand the laws and the rules of our world around us far better than we can, because we are immersed in a three-dimensional world.
I feel like he just rattled off a half-ass like life science article that he read about general relativity or special relativity, either one really. I feel like that is like his little speech right there about things is the product of half-ass reading some science articles.
Right. So I guess those are just some of the five main issues that I have with it. And I've been in some discussions with people, and I consider myself a pretty religious person. I'm a Christian. I believe that God created the world and Jesus came back to save me from my sins, but that doesn't mean that I think that anybody who doesn't believe in him is damned, right? I think that is quite a stigma of Christianity and of religion as a whole, and this kind of goes back to the religious negativity bias, is they assume that every religion basically says if you don't believe what we believe, then you're damned to eternal hell, right? I kind of go more, I believe it's agnostic on that, which is I don't know, right? I don't know if, why would God have created the world and then, damned 3/4 of the population just because they didn't believe it, or even more, whatever.
That is a really good question there, Psychonaut, whatever the fuck your name is. That's a really, really good question. I'm glad that you're asking that question. And also, you're completely deviating from the Christian and the Jewish message. Because yes, both Judaism, Christianity, Islam, plenty of other religions out there are mutually exclusive. You cannot get into their respective holy heaven places without completely believing in that particular religion. I get that you're straying away from your religion, and I guess I commend you for that, but if you don't know where that comes from, then you obviously haven't read your holy scripture, because it's right in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. I mean, Jesus literally says that he is the way, the truth, and the light. Like, nobody can come to God but through me. You seem to just not even know your own theology, and you seem to be making up your own Christian theology, which, to be honest, is what all denominations kind of do anyways, right? You're just kind of making up your own denomination, the denomination of Psychonaut. Everybody gets into heaven as long as you're a good motherfucker.
Percentage of the population. But I kind of also go to a quote by, I believe, Dalai Lama on this, and I'm just going to paraphrase him. And he says that we need to stick to our own cultures, right? It's not so much about just abandoning all of your ideas and then going to one particular belief system. It's kind of about staying with the people that you've been raised with and staying with the culture that you've been raised with. It's not about just throwing everything out the door and just going to one particular set of ideas.
What you basically just said there was that everybody has their own religion, and everybody's religion is correct, and it doesn't matter what religion you hold, you get into heaven. So I'm really questioning it here. Like, why does he have a problem with atheism? Like, if he thinks that everybody gets into heaven anyways, regardless of whether or not you believe in God, and atheists are literally not telling people you have to leave your faith, considering religion to be horrible in general is not us trying to make people leave their faith, right? It just kind of seems like, what's the point in even having a religion in the first place? It seems like he's only read portions of his Bible that he wants to read or that people have taught him. And I would encourage him to read more so that you can get a full picture of this God that you supposedly worship. But it just seems to me like you've got a lot of problems with science, not so much atheists.
But another thing too is that I don't find a whole lot of peace in the idea that there is just eternal black in death, right? If anything, psychedelic substances have shown me that. But it really makes them so upset. They get so upset when anybody says anything about there being a higher world, because people can't. The only reason they're mad about it is because it can't be proven with science and it can't be observed with our five physical senses,
That's not why we have a problem with it. I mean, that you're leaving out a whole lot of nuance here, man, because all religious people use heaven in different ways. There are some religious assholes out there that like to use heaven as the reason why they're yelling at you on the street. They don't want you to go to hell. They want you to go to heaven. So you need to repent, motherfucker, is basically their sentiment. And you have people just like yourself there, Psychonaut, who thinks that just everybody will go to heaven as long as you're a good person. You don't have to believe in my God to get into heaven. There are those people as well. So you boiling it down to atheists being mad about heaven because we can't prove it scientifically is just wrong. We're not mad about heaven. We're not mad about any of that. In fact, I would say probably most atheists don't know whether or not there is anything after this life, because most atheists are agnostic atheists. You even use that word agnostic, so I know that you know what that means, but you're leaving out a whole lot of ways that people use the heaven and hell thing in order to try to convince other people to join their faith. Atheists aren't trying to convince people to leave their faith, but people of faith regularly try to convince people of non-belief and of other beliefs to join their faith because they're going to burn in hell for eternity. It's love God or burn in hell for eternity. You're just leaving out a whole lot of shit here. Oh, also the whole blackness or whatever, like that really doesn't bother me. I think that I would eventually lose my mind if we lived on forever. At some point, I feel like there's a breaking point for the human psyche, regardless of what situation you're in.
But I mean, just look at all the things that are happening that we can't even perceive of, right? Like we have all these different pieces of equipment that can detect the invisible wavelengths of light and the different colors of light that we can't actually see in the world around us. And like the radio waves, right? and the fact that sounds are wavelengths, but we can't perceive that they are wavelengths. And so we have these systems that are set up, right? There's all these spectrums that are going on around us, right? I kind of go back to Alan Watts again there. The world is composed of a whole bunch of different spectrums, right? We have 5 senses to detect what we have around us, but that does not mean that we can detect all of it, right? From the gamma rays to the sun, to even the quantum world, right? There is far so much happening around us that we do not have a immediate perception of. We just have tools that could be very flawed in nature that are kind of making sense of the world around us.
Well, you see, that's where the benefit of science comes in, because science tries to remove any potential like contamination or anything like that. So, I mean, we can detect gamma rays, we can detect quarks. I mean, we know that quarks exist, and it's because it's been shown in the science lab. And we may come to understand these things even more in depth, but we can detect them and we can reliably detect them. We know that these things do exist and do happen. We know that X-rays exist. We know the different wavelengths of the electromagnetic spectrum and what they do and its effects on things. And well, one good example is actually the Michelson-Morley experiment. Basically, with that one, they were trying to detect whether the ether existed. This would be an example of one of these things that we can't immediately perceive, but we should be able to detect if it actually exists. With the Michelson-Morley experiment, it boiled down to we could detect the rotation of the Earth, but we couldn't detect a wind, like an ether wind, or us moving through what seems to be invisible plane, I guess. We weren't able to detect that. So it kind of seems like there are different tests that we can use in order to detect these things in reality. That's why we haven't been able to detect the supernatural. We haven't been able to detect this higher plane of existence. Now, does that mean that those things definitely don't exist? No. I've never asserted that those things definitely don't exist. I have only asserted that we don't have the evidence to suggest that they do. And until you can provide that evidence, I'm going to withhold believing in it because you just haven't convinced me. So, and that's all it takes is evidence. That's all you need is evidence to convince me. Yeah, that's it for his video. All of his 5 points, except for one of them, I believe one of them was that atheists or atheism is anti-religious, which it's not that. So all 5 of these points are either grievances with science or not atheism. Those are the 2 things that his 5 points boil down to. So if you're hoping to convince people that atheism has fundamental problems, maybe you should revisit this and actually pick 5 things that are directly related to atheism and not tangentially concerned with atheism, or that atheism is tangentially concerned with. It would just be great if somebody could actually present an accurate view of what atheism is and then establish what their problems are. That would be great. If you're a religious person watching and you've got the wherewithal to make a video and put it out there and send it to me, I will review that sumbitch, and I won't be mean. I hope that you guys loved this video tonight. If you did, be sure to subscribe and smash that like button. Then I guess I'll see you heathens later. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Bye, heathens.